record of the welcome by the nation's capital. Swooping in out of a cloudless sky, the President's own giant transport, bringing General of the Army Dwight D. Eisenhower home from Europe, lands at Washington Airport after a stop-off in Bermuda. Flying with the General are 53 officers and enlisted men who will share the honors the nation has planned for its illustrious soldier. Standing on American soil for the first time in 18 months, General Eisenhower's first audible words were, "God, it's swell to be back." For the General's wife, reunion after those long, weary months of waiting is the thrill of a lifetime. Eisenhower's own 86-piece Army band salutes the nation's man of the hour. The well-laid plans to hold back reporters and cameramen go a little haywire as the boys swarm around the General. Now with Mrs. Eisenhower, he stands with General and Mrs. Marshall, the Marshal who has known him since West Point days, and the man largely responsible for selecting Eisenhower as the General to lead our armies. With his Chief of Staff, he smilingly consents to pose for the cameraman. Some 20 to 30,000 enthusiastic admirers jam-pack every vantage point to get the first glimpse of the General. Wearing a smart summer uniform that was rushed to Bermuda for the occasion, the General is the hero of all America. The infectious grin, the ready smile that has endeared this modest soldier to the entire civilized world is typical of the 54-year-old Texas-born Kansan who is known to king and commoner as Ike. 35 months ago, he was a lieutenant colonel. Now he sits with the Chief of Staff of the United States Army, the most honored man in American military history. The cavalcade begins to roll toward the city. In number 1 car with his naval aide, Commander Butcher, riding in front, the General is calm and unruffled. Stopping at the Pentagon building to be greeted privately by Secretary of War Stimson and 32,000 War Department workers, the cavalcade rolls across Memorial Bridge for the 8-mile drive to the capital. Even the waves wave as all Washington turns out to hail the man who brought the United Nations victory in Europe. Just 1 year ago this month, we listened for news of our armies fighting in Normandy. That Eisenhower should have led us to so spectacular a victory in 11 breathtaking months is almost too much to conceive. The motorcade circles Lincoln Memorial, every inch of the line of march lined with waving, cheering people. Down Constitution Avenue, the general raises his arm in salute to the throngs who call out his name. Then in front of the District of Columbia building, the commissioners present the general with the keys to the city. Both London and Paris accorded him the same honor, but after all, this is home and headquarters. A shower of confetti streaming from Washington's staid, austere buildings is typical of the pulse of conservative Washington today. For the first time since the war, the Capitol declares a holiday. Virtually all business is suspended to allow the people, war workers and civilians, to line the route of the parade. Flanked by armored cars bearing picked men of his command, the procession moves through the 86-degree heat. The only thing that refuses to wilt is the famous Eisenhower smile. G.I. Joe salutes as the motorcade pulls up in front of the Capitol. Here the general pauses to greet a soldier of the last war and to salute those who have given their bodies in the defense of America during World War II. Then, as crowds gathered in Capitol Square listen to the ceremonies over a public address system, the general goes to speak before the American Congress. We will now bring you General Eisenhower as he addressed the nation by radio beginning at exactly 34 minutes past 12 o'clock this afternoon.
Members of the Congress, it is my great pleasure and my distinct privilege I'll present to you General of the Army, Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Forces, General Eisenhower. My imagination could not picture a more dramatic moment than this in the life of any American. I stand before the elected federal lawmakers of our great republic, the very core of our political life, and the symbol of those things we call the American heritage. To preserve that heritage, 3 million American citizens at your behest have faced resolutely every terror the ruthless Nazis could devise. The American troops on battlefields of Africa and Europe, over which armies have been fighting for more than 2,000 years of recorded history. None of those battlefields has seen a more worthy soldier than the trained American. The real beginning for us was in December 1941, when our late great war leader, President Roosevelt, met with his friend, Prime Minister Churchill, and forged a definition of Allied organizational and directional methods for the prosecution of this war. During most of my 3 years in Europe, these two God-given men were my joint commanders-in-chief. The abilities of the Soviet leaders and the courage and fortitude of their fighting men and women stir the emotions of anyone who admires soldierly virtue. The Soviet people have been called upon for terrible sacrifices in their own land, ravished by the bestial excesses of the Germans. Driven back to Stalingrad, their calm refusal to acknowledge the possibility of any other outcome than victory will be honored in history for all time to come. The battlefront and the home front. Together we have found the victory. But even the banners of triumph cannot hide from our sight the sacrifices in which victory has been bought. The hard task of a commander is to send men into battle knowing some of them, often many, must be killed or wounded in order that necessary missions may be achieved. It is a soul-killing task. The soldier knows how grim and black was the outlook for the Allies in 1941 and 1942. He is fully aware of the magnificent way the United Nations responded to the threat. To his mind, the problems of peace can be no more difficult than the one you had to solve more than 3 years ago, and which in one battle area has been brought to a glorious conclusion. He knows that in war, the threat of separate annihilation tends to hold allies together. He hopes we can find in peace a nobler incentive to produce the same unity.
Of General Eisenhower as he arrives from Washington. It's a good-natured, happy throng. It's Mr. and Mrs. America and every junior who could skip school who are here today to say welcome home to the soldier whose epic deeds have won the admiration of his countrymen. Did we say admiration? Well, here's one who's both wide-eyed and speechless. The Mayor's welcoming committee includes Admiral Leary, commander of the Eastern Sea Frontier, and Grover Whalen, the city's traditional greeter. The big ship Sunflower taxis to a point directly in front of the administration building, and at exactly 17 minutes past 10 o'clock, to the cheers of the thousands waiting, General Eisenhower steps from the President's own plane, the plane in which he has flown all the way from Europe. General Grunert of the Eastern Defense Command is the first to shake his hand. Then Mayor LaGuardia steps forward, and then Admiral Leary. A 17-gun salute thunders its military note as the general briskly inspects the crack guard of military police from Governor's Island drawn up in his honor. As the 321st Service Force Band plays his favorite march, General Ike walks over to take his place in the motorcade, waiting to escort him through the city. There's a wild scramble among the cameramen as the caravan rolls into a Grand Central Parkway, lined every foot of the way with cheering New Yorkers. Schools in the neighborhood closed so that youngsters might see history being made. Tireless and still cheerful after many days of this sort of thing, the general never seems to lose the famous grin for which he is famous. The mayor waves the cameramen ahead. He wants everybody to get a view of the general. Across Triborough Bridge, the procession rolls at a lively clip. After 18 months overseas, this view of New York is a real welcome home sight for the general. Winding through Central Park, past thousands of school children who are getting their first glimpse of the man who is rewriting their history books, the general's car heads for Fifth Avenue. Here the procession picks up a band, and New York's great thoroughfare puts on a gala front to say, "Hello, Ike, and welcome home." Oh yes, a group of happy Legionnaires from Brooklyn managed to have their big moment in the parade. Floating majestically over St. Patrick's Cathedral, a giant Navy blimp follows the procession. And from the steps of the cathedral, Archbishop Spellman and high church dignitaries give the general the church's blessing. Exhausting all superlatives, we can only say that New York's spontaneous turnout is one of those things that happen once in a lifetime. For a city that has taken the war in its stride, for a people who have risen to every occasion, this demonstration to the modest Texas-born Kansan is a tribute straight from the heart. NBC listeners heard Ben Grauer's word picture of the day as the networks went all out to bring its radio audience the story of the favorite son's return. In front of the library at 42nd and 5th, a sizable part of the city's 6 millions waited for hours to see Ike ride by. Department stores, office buildings display flags of the Allies. The welcome mat is out from one end of town to the other. The Red Cross Blood Donor Center is a timely reminder to all Americans that we're still fighting a war in the Pacific. But today is Ike's Day, and the big town takes the general to its heart. On Lower Fifth Avenue, the procession is now headed by the Firemen's Band as it sweeps past Madison Square and the Eternal Light at 23rd and Broadway. Covered by press, radio, motion pictures, and television, the General's homecoming is perhaps the most widely publicized event since Lindbergh came back from Paris. At City Hall, wounded veterans occupy places of honor. In the reserve section is a crowd of some 200,000 overflows into the square. Then, atop a special platform decorated with the 5 stars of his rank, the general is officially welcomed to the city. Stands at attention as Marian Anderson sings the Star-Spangled Banner. Made an honorary citizen of the metropolis, the general is presented with a gold medal of the city of New York. Next stop for the party is the mayor's home, and up Fifth Avenue through the traditional Victory Arch in Washington Square, the cavalcade speeds northward. Up 7th Avenue through the canyons of the Garment District, a confetti shower is reminiscent of the days when New York really threw telephone books out of windows. Times Square, packed for hours with lines of waiting people, was prepared to give the general its time-honored hurrah. For NBC, Mary Margaret McBride and movie starlet Peggy Ann Garner described the scene from the Astor. But as the cavalcade swings into view, Broadway has to take a quick look. Rolling along at a lively clip, it's hello and goodbye. General Ike is on his way to lunch and his first big league ball game in a long time. The game, incidentally, was televised by WNBT direct from the Polo Grounds. And so the big town rings down the curtain on a great day. For 12 eventful hours, it was E-Day in New York. The general has captured another city.